Can you name the 3 deadliest terror groups in the world? ISIS, Al-Qaeda, what's the third? It's Boko Haram. And don't feel bad if you didn't know that. Most of us in the newsroom didn't know either. So we started to dig a little deeper. In early 2015, 2 major terror attacks happened in the same week. One was in Paris when 2 brothers connected to Al-Qaeda raided the office of the satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo and killed 17 people. In the aftermath, world leaders and millions of people poured into the streets of Paris in solidarity, and the hashtag #JeSuisCharlie went viral overnight. Major news outlets gave the attack wall-to-wall coverage. The New York Times included it on its front page for 10 days in a row. The other was in rural Nigeria, where Boko Haram ransacked villages, killing an estimated 2,000 civilians. But for whatever reason, these deaths weren't as newsworthy. The Times, for example, didn't cover the massacre until a full week after the attack. So why do these people get wall-to-wall coverage on mainstream media, whereas these people do not? Well, there are a number of reasons. The first has to do with logistics. Boko Haram only carries out attacks in northeastern Nigeria and surrounding areas. The region is lawless and remote, and when terrorists strike, there are often no journalists on the ground near the action.
I was the only journalist who was there at the time on the front lines of the conflict.
That's now this senior correspondent Kaj Larson. Kaj embedded with the Nigerian army to cover Boko Haram a few years ago.
At the time when I initially went, the Nigerian government had banned journalists from covering the conflict. In fact, during the time where I was able to sneak in and actually see the conflict, 2 Al Jazeera journalists tried to do the same thing. They ended up being detained and arrested.
And for the journalists who are in Nigeria, the job's extremely dangerous. Boko Haram carries out attacks on an almost daily basis, killing nearly as many people as ISIS every year. Their operation is largely built off the backs of children, whom they kidnap and send to crowded areas like schools or markets with explosives strapped to their chests. Despite the fact that an attack could happen at any moment, many news organizations do not ensure their journalists on the ground.
And so as a result, they're unwilling to sort of take that risk, and they're happy to kind of take whatever coverage that they can get off of the wires, or that, you know, when there's a big enough story, they may be able to sort of scrape together sort of high-level quotes and a file photo.
Patrick Rose is UNICEF's Crisis Communications Specialist for West and Central Africa. He says the biggest reason we're not seeing more coverage of Boko Haram is that international news outlets often choose not to cover it.
The interest from international media is often sporadic. The question and the sad reality that maybe we in the sort of developed countries need to ask ourselves is nobody cares to see those photos after a certain while.
This is on top of the fact that poor, rural populations everywhere are more at risk of neglect by world powers, the media, and even their own governments. That brings us to point 3, which is that northeastern Nigeria is not exactly on everyone's radar.
When you get into this kind of deep interior, we're talking, you know, several hundred miles, this is an area that has less sort of engagement within the sort of the Britishness of what Nigerian colonial history was. Geopolitically and resource-wise, this is not something that European or global powers have a vested economic interest or even a strategic interest in.
The Nigerian government's role in all of this is complicated. Some experts say officials are doing everything they can to fight Boko Haram and promote free press in the country, while others have accused the state of blocking journalists from covering the group or purposefully minimizing its impact.
People have lost faith in government. They don't believe government speaks the truth.
We have come under heavy, harassment, intimidation from the military. We put our lives in danger as well. So if we are doing that for the sake of our nation, we should not be facing attack from those who should be defending us.
Perhaps the most egregious example of this is former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, who radically downplayed the death toll of the Baga massacre in order to bolster his own campaign for re-election.
Nigeria must move forward.
All acts of terror are atrocious and worthy of fair, accurate coverage, including the unthinkable acts carried out by the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. But certain innocent victims are getting more media attention than others. The area is dangerous to cover, the issues at hand are complex, and the victims are from Africa, a continent that is often not the focus of the media. The fact is, the media covers what people are willing to watch or click on. That means change doesn't start with the media, it starts with you, the consumer.